Good evening everyone, welcome to Davenport Lyons. My name's Roger Billings. I'm a partner who does a lot of work in the publishing section of the firm, and we've got several other partners here who are also in the publishing business. So if you've got any legal questions, please feel free to discuss them with us afterwards. But the purpose of this evening is to talk about iPads and the effect on journalism. Now, there's a strange coincidence because I knew this was coming up this weekend on Monday, and so did Gerald. And we both got iPads for different reasons over the weekend, so in preparation for today. So I'd like to introduce Claire Barrett, who's going to be chairing the question and answer session. And without further ado, Claire.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're a bit of an intimate group, I think partly because of the Indian summer / monsoon, which seems to have started early this evening. But thank you very much, Roger, for hosting our event, which is the latest in the IDP Futures Group series. We have a good selection of people. We've got Tina Smith, who is a freelance designer who works for Property Week magazine and Lost in London, which is an independent publication. And Tina is our creative person who works with journalists to tell stories in different and engaging ways using what technology can do. Then we have my colleague Chris from the Financial Times, who's going to kick off proceedings in a minute and give us a short presentation of the FT's controversial app, which has since parted company with Apple. And then we've got Michael, who's the managing editor of World Architecture, which many of you will read, who brings the editorial perspective.
I'm Chris Ware. I'm part of the web development team at the Financial Times. I'm a web developer by trade and now a technical lead responsible for the desktop application, which is www.ft.com, and also the mobile and tablet strategy as well. We've got several digital channels that we distribute our content through. The one that people will be most familiar with is the desktop application. We also have a mobile website as well, which is we consider it a website. It's basically a smaller view of the main application. It's written using the same technologies. In April 2010, Steve Jobs invented the iPad, so we developed an iPad app. At this point, it was a native application. Now, native means it's written using proprietary code specifically for that device, and it's distributed through an app store or a marketplace that's written for that device as well. So it locks you in very much to one particular device, one particular technology, in this case Apple. That was fine. I mean, the app was great, well received, functioned very well. And then approximately a year later, the terms and conditions changed. Apple decided that they want a 30% cut, basically, any subscription sold through the App Store, any apps in the App Store. Now, we at the FT deal with a subscriber base. We know quite a lot about who our subscribers are, and we kind of want to keep it that way. One of the other terms and conditions was that any of that user data would not be available to us if anybody signed up through the App Store. The conditions were revised slightly, but basically it still meant if you sell anything through an App Store, you have to pay 30% to Apple. So that pretty much killed that. Luckily, at the same time, we were developing a web app. Now, to define a web app, it's using the same technology that you would get on the website. So it's using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If anybody's familiar, those are the sort of the front end, the languages of the web, basically. So it's very much more standard. So you can do write one web app and then use it across multiple different devices. You just run it in the browser. And the web app was born. So we'll have a demo of that in just a second. What it's meant is that we can now write that web app and then distribute it onto different devices, different manufacturers' devices. Quite simply, we take that one web app and we wrap it in a native wrapper. So we can do the same for the iPhone, and we can do it for Android devices, Windows Phone, and BlackBerry Playbook. So to summarise that, the web app gives us a build once, run anywhere thing. You can sort of think of it as a factory, basically. We've got write it once over one side and then distribute it across multiple platforms quite easily. So it's in fact, 20% of the FT's web traffic, that's 90 million hits on the desktop side of things. I'm not quite sure how many there are at the moment on the mobile side of things, but 20% of all our traffic goes through mobile channels, so into ft.com and the app. And 15% of FT readers access content on 2 or more channels, so they're using the website and a mobile device or different mobile devices. We've had 600,000 users access the web app since its launch. This, you can't really see that there, but this is leading on to the sort of the future of mobile technology, really, and the fact that laptop sales have decreased considerably since the iPad launched in 2010 now. So there's a definite curve up for tablets and down for other mobile devices. So the question, is the iPad the answer, or is it just another tool? Well, Apple have taken the tablet from nothing. Nobody really knew they wanted one until it arrived, and then everybody wants one. They think that they're going to have a market share until 2014. 40% of the devices are going to be specifically going to be iPads. The rest of them will be different devices, Android devices. So, whether the question about whether it's here to stay is proven by this. This Jean-Luc Picard is using a tablet in the 21st century. How it affects journalism? Well, digital journalism, I think, journalists and newsrooms and stuff have to be able to adapt to the pace that digital technology is evolving at. So there's no question really of these things not affecting how journalists write. Interestingly, social journalism as well is something that's probably worth talking about. There's it's not enough just to write articles and content anymore. You have to be able to interact with your readers and moderate and comment and blog, both from a sort of journalist side of things and from the user side of things as well. So a device like this would give you, certainly if you are a consumer of the content, it will give you a much better way to interact with the content that you're reading. But also, another question would be, can the tablet be used as a content creation device as well? I mean, if you're out and about and using something like this to actually create the content and then submit it.
It's taken over really from the BlackBerry in terms of, like, you used to get emails saying from my BlackBerry, forgive me for the spelling errors, and now you get emails saying from my iPad. And I think certainly when people do get them, they can't live without them.
And there are kind of 3 main real approaches for magazine publishing on the iPad, and one is, the first one, I just got this for example, so we haven't got anything nearly as busy as Chris had. The first one is a sort of basically more of a straight PDF reader. So this is basically just exactly the magazine content. So I think there are some advantages to this. It's very easy, it doesn't take much time because you're using existing content, and I believe, although I'm not on that side of things, that it's a quite cheap way of doing it. But the disadvantages are there's very, very little or no multimedia. It clearly hasn't been designed for the device. You can't read any of that without zooming in. It takes quite a long time to render things. It's not really taking advantage of the tablet, but it's just a way of quickly getting content out there in a way you don't have to carry lots of paper around. So there's loads and loads of different types. I'm being very general in these 3 sort of general areas. So this is live HTML basically. It's code-based magazines content. So you don't have so much of a typical magazine experience. It's almost more like a website. I think it has, again, advantages and disadvantages. You can have vastly more content. You can just flow loads and loads of it in, and it will just flow on pages and pages and pages. Once you've got templates established, these are all pretty much bespoke. You can flow in all the same content. You can, because everything is live, you can change the type, size, and that sort of thing. It has lots of interactivity like that, but it has a lot of the same problems as a website. It has less design control. You get orphans and widows and things that break in ugly ways and all that sort of thing. It's sort of less highly designed. It's more templated, and it's not necessarily as good for multimedia videos and things like that. Fine, but it's not as bespoke, I suppose, in individual features. The other thing that it can have as an issue is that it's sort of, if it's taking content live from the website, you need to have something that allows you to take it then offline, because I think it's going to be very annoying if you sit down on the tube and think, right, I'll read that thing, open it, and it says, oh, you're not connected to the internet, and it's all wiped it all up, and that sort of thing does happen. I'm sure that's something that you guys have encountered. I know there's ways around it, but it's everything's still, it's teething stages with everything, and I think nobody wants a manual. Everybody's going to get annoyed if they get error messages all the time. But so there's pros and cons to all of these things. The third sort, which is more the sort that I've been involved in, this is more like a magazine. This is using the Adobe system. There are other ones like it, and you have maximum design control. You can have all sorts of different. It's all completely bespoke. It's more like a magazine, and it uses all the exact same tools as a magazine designer would normally use, as I would use. So it's all in design with a few plugins and some extra costs, but essentially. Because of that, you have that sort of total design control. The downside to that is that it's a lot slower. You can't flow it in, it just happens automatically. Someone's got to sit there and say, right, that headline goes here and that goes there, and all that sort of thing. And the file sizes are much bigger because it's not live information data, it's flattened out pages with videos and things put on top. So I was going to say there are sort of three. To me, anyway, there are three main types of sort of receiving digital information now. There's sort of alerts type thing, which is almost like your Twitter feed. You want to be the first to know everything. It comes through. You want to immediately tell somebody else about it. It's just what's new, tell me quickly. Then there's the second sort, which is the Google approach, which is just, oh, I don't need to know everything. I'll just quickly Google it. And I think for a lot of specialist websites, people might want to know about the Olympics, for example, from a property perspective. You don't want to put Olympics in, you get all kinds of rubbish that you're not interested in at all. So I think websites really have a role in that sense to give people what they want from this search thing. And the other one is a sort of a digest, which I think is where this comes into its own, which is, I'm finished work now, I'm on the train home, or I'm going on holiday, and I want to have a real in-depth package, a real sort of enjoyable experience. I don't want to be faffing around with things. I just want something that's presented to me and it's very intuitive to use and very content rich. And I think that's where this really comes in. I think everything says teething. Everything in 5 years is going to look clunky that we've got now. I think the key thing is keep your navigation and your user experience as clear and simple as possible. It's all very well things that we can do, but people don't want to be impressed and then bamboozled. They want something that's a viable tool now that they understand and that they naturally know how to use. And so I think it's important to avoid being overly busy with designs just because you can, and use established conventions as much as they are. Use Adobe, and because it's you've got lots of other magazines using it, and iPad users might be familiar with it. Use as much as possible iPad native types of symbols and things like that, so that it's as natural as possible for people.
Well, I'll cut to you, Michael. I mean, as an editor, it strikes me, Tina, saying you've got all these endless choices. You can have video, you can have links, you can have graphics. How does that change the editorial process and deciding what you want and who's going to do it?
Well, no, completely. Obviously, yeah. But we're still committed at this point. We are. The whole thing is, as Tina was saying, we're in transition, and it's going to be quite different. So it's very difficult to see where we're going to end up. We know we're in transition, but we don't know exactly where we're going to end up. But one thing for sure is that there is this huge demand now for video and audio content, and so that's something we're just having to kind of bite the bullet and get on with it, while still producing the news and delivering the news in the normal way, because that demand hasn't gone away. It's kind of been augmented by this, so we kind of got to split both ways. Yeah, it's a challenge, sure.
Advertisers obviously can see, or in the future will be able to see, how many people are clicking on that advert and clicking through. Certainly one anxiety shared by other journalists I know is that with the continued functionality of websites and the iPad, if editors can see how few or how many clicks a certain story gets, it might shape your coverage, and you might decide that you don't need an architecture critic anymore, you need a video interviewer.
Yeah, it is interesting. We are more accountable now than probably any sort of paper media's gone, and unfortunately, advertisers have all got their own interests, and that they will ask for a breakdown. And when you start, we've got huge traffic, but when you start breaking it down, how many people actually read our news in the Middle East, and you find that they just want to look at Dubai, and suddenly it's a very small number. They're, this isn't very big, and they're able to drill down and see literally everything. And that's another challenge that you've got in that. We're actually tracking our iPhone app. We've got a back end thing where somehow we've managed to tap into that, and we're actually monitoring that, and we're seeing that people are using the news on that, the same news stories, but they're actually reading different stories because of the way it's presented. So we're still, we're just saying about being on a learning curve. We're still trying to understand what it is that makes people read different stories. And one thing that is fascinating though with these mobile devices, we are accessing people with more time, and I think that's the big thing that we hadn't appreciated, is that most of our news had been delivered to desktops, to people at their working station. Now we're delivering news to them on trains and on buses where they've got more time.
You've got a captive audience.
We've got a captive audience, and that's really quite interesting, and that means that sometimes they're actually able to write longer editorial pieces because people are actually able to read it, which they're not when they're at the workstation and they just sort of look at pictures and kind of move on.
I subscribe to The Economist, and I get it both ways, because at least until very recently, the only way you could get the iPad edition was to pay for the print edition. I'm not sure that's still true. And also from day one, the Times had it. They had an iPad edition before anybody had an iPad in the country, because it came out day one. And we still get it delivered through the door, the newspaper. When I'm abroad, of course, it's magic, because I can lie in my hammock in Catalonia and download The Economist or The Times from IBA Banda, which is radio broadband, which covers the whole of Spain. Unlike here, we don't seem to be able to do that sort of thing. And then you have it on the iPad in a way you have not got the choice of the print. Whereas at home, you've got the choice. And the strange thing is that I could save money by cancelling the newspaper.
But do you still feel a kind of physical affection for them?
Yes, I think that's the point. That The Economist, I will just make this point. The Economist is index driven. And for that reason, it's better on the iPad than in print. Because you don't read it like a book, you go and select the stories you're interested in from the index. And the iPad makes that a better experience than the print. And to that extent, it shows how iPad publishing, just without all the video and add-on media stuff, can still be a better experience.
All that remains for me to do is thank the panel very much. We've got a real wealth of expertise here. If we could have a small show of applause before we go into the back room, and also thank you to our host Davenport Lyons, and see you at the next event, I hope.